Chapter 61 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Bharata the Deer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bharata was born again. Since his thoughts were fixed on the deer, since with his last breath he was calling out to the deer silently, he was born as a deer. But he was fortunate in one thing. He had the privilege of remembering his previous birth. Overcome with self-pity, he told himself, "What a pitiable state is mine now. I had abandoned all kinds of attachments. I had made the forest my home, and my mind was ever lost in thoughts of the Lord and in remembering the many stories about him. There was place in my heart for Narayana, and nothing else could find a place there. My mind was firmly fixed on his lotus feet, and into the calm lake came a disturbing factor, the affection I developed for the deer. So powerful was it that it made me forget everything else, even my Lord Narayana. I had strayed far away from the path I had been following. As a result of that, I have been born as a deer instead of reaching the Brahmi state. Such is the power of affection and attachment to worldly things. I must try and exhaust this birth by associating myself with people whose thoughts dwell on him. My mind will once again become attuned to the higher sphere. By thinking on him, by listening to his praises, by listening to conversations and talks about his glory, I will be rid of this janma and I will become free of this earthly bondage." In the form of a deer, Bharata travelled towards Shaligrama, which was the spot where rishis congregate. Staying there, living on the grass growing in the ashrama and drinking the waters of the river flowing there, Bharata spent his life painfully waiting for death, which would relieve him. Finally, he died and was granted freedom from the form of a deer, a mere animal. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Chapter 62 of Shrimad Bhagavatam, Jada Bharata. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There was a Brahmin belonging to the Angirasa clan. He was a very good man. He had followed the rules of conduct set down for a Brahmin. He had 9 sons by his first wife, and his second wife bore him a son and a daughter. The son of the second wife was none other than Bharata, who had to be born again. Bharata had been the son of Rishabha, an incarnation of Lord Narayana, and so Narayana had himself taught his son all the dharma to be followed by a mumukshu, one who aches for freedom from bondage. Bharata had been initiated into the Atma Vidya and he had almost achieved it. But then, because of the prarabdha karma, which he had to exhaust, he had to be born as a deer, and after that, one more janma was needed to grant him freedom. Relentless is fate, and the path to salvation is not easy. It has been said that yogis are born in the homes of good men, and Bharata was born in the home of a good Brahmin. Because of the disgust he felt with himself as a result of his fall from grace in his previous janma, Bharata did not want to form any new attachment with anyone. And in his family, he was found to hold himself aloof from others. He was a different child as far as his father was concerned. The poor man tried his best to initiate his son into the mystery of the Gayatri, the music mantra. And though he spent several months in his attempt, he was not able to get any response from his son. Bharata would deliberately mispronounce the words and recite them out of tune. He refused to learn anything, and gradually he managed to produce the impression that he was a deaf mute. People called him a fool, an imbecile, but he was not in the least affected by what people said. He remembered his previous births, and he was bent on only one thing: freedom from this earthly bondage. And so, like rain falling on the back of a buffalo, the comments of the men of the world did not affect him in the least, nor did it affect his general behavior. His father was drowned in the performance of worldly duties and worldly affections, and he was very unhappy that he could not make a good Brahmin of his son. In course of time he died. His wife left her son and daughter in the care of her stepsons and their mother. She followed her husband on the funeral fire. Once their father was dead, the brothers of Bharata felt that they did not have to do much for Bharata. They felt that they did not have any responsibility as far as Bharata was concerned. They lost no time in ill-treating their stepbrother. Bharata would never protest, and that made them happy. They would make him labor in the fields like any ordinary workman, and they insulted his birth as a Brahmin. But Bharata did not mind it at all. He would work till sunset and would be satisfied with whatever food the brothers gave him. Sometimes it would be old musty flour, and sometimes he would get only the husk from the grains. They all tasted the same to Bharata, and he spent his hours thinking on the Lord and doing menial work for his brothers. There was a robber chieftain who did not have any children. He was told that offering a human being as a sacrifice to the goddess Kali would get him a son. He therefore sent his servants in all directions to bring a human being fit enough for the sacrifice. They searched in vain all through the day, and they saw that night had set in. They were wandering around. Suddenly at a distance they saw a human being standing on mound. Standing on a raised spot, Bharata was guarding the fields to prevent their being destroyed by deer and wild hogs during the night. The servants of the robber chieftain drew near and looked at Bharata. He had always been unmindful of the comforts of the body. Rain or shine, cold or heat were all the same to him. He had not even covered his body properly. As he was used to lying on the ground or anywhere, his body was covered with dust and grime. His hair was all dirty and matted. He was like a precious stone covered with clay. His sacred thread was black and dull. Life in the open and the hardihood he had undergone all these years had made the body of Bharata strong and powerful. Looking at him, the servants of the robber king thought that he was the perfect victim. His body, though dirty, was without a single blemish or wound or even a scratch. They lost no time in making up their minds. They tied him up with ropes and carried him away with them. They were rather surprised at his unresisting attitude when they tied him up. They took him to the temple. He was bathed in holy water, and he was dressed in the cloths meant for a sacrificial victim. They smeared sandal paste all over his body, and his forehead bore the mark of the red sindhura. They made him partake of a big meal and then placed him before the altar of the goddess. There was wild music and beating of drums. All the while Bharata sat silent and unaffected. The priest then pronounced the incantations and lifted his sword to kill the Brahmin. The goddess could not bear the glow emanating from the Brahmin sitting there ready to be killed. His Brahmic glory was burning her, and she came out unable to bear it. She saw that a great crime was about to be committed. A poor, unresisting Brahmin was to be killed by a group of robbers, bloodthirsty villains, every one of them, and the crime was ascribed to her. She was followed by a group of servants from the heavens. She stood there watching while they fell on the miscreants, killed all of them, and drank their fill of their blood. The goddess disappeared after blessing the Brahmin, and he too went on his way. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Chapter 63 of Shrimadbhagavatam. Bharata, the Planquin Bearer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Once a king by name Rahuguna was travelling along the banks of the river Ikshumati. He was lord of the countries Sindhu and Sauvira. He was being carried in a palanquin, and the bearers thought that one more man would make it easier for them to carry the weight. They looked around, and their eyes fell on Bharata, who was standing there. He was well built. He looked strong and tough, and they felt that he was ideal for the job. Accordingly, they called him out to him and ordered him to help them. Bharata, who presented the appearance of a stupid person, did not speak a word. Though it was degrading for a Brahmin to carry the palanquin of a Kshatriya, he did not protest. He lifted it silently along with the others. On the way, at every step, he would scrutinize to see if there were any helpless germs, insects, or worms. Making sure that there were none, he would then place his foot on the spot. Naturally, this upset the rhythm of the pace of the others, and most of the time the palanquin was lopsided. The king became quite annoyed about it and said, "Why is this palanquin leaning to one side like this? Can you not do your job in the proper manner?" The servant said, "It is not our fault, my lord. This newcomer is not falling into step with us, and hence the inconvenience to you." The king looked at the newcomer, and he looked him up and down. In a sarcastic voice he said, "Poor man, you look pitiable. You have been carrying the burden all by yourself all this distance. You are very tired, and your form is so thin and in fact emaciated. Your muscles are flabby, and you are not tough like the others. My friend, you are also too old to work." Bharata was silent. He did not speak a word in retort, but silently he lifted up the palanquin to his shoulders. They began to move. A few steps had been taken, a few feet of ground had been covered, and again the same thing happened. This time the king was openly angry. He said, "You fool! What do you think you are doing? You are behaving like a walking corpse. You disregard my commands, and you are behaving impertinently. I will teach you a lesson, and I will do it so thoroughly that you will get some sense into your head. I must punish your arrogance." The king was proud of the fact that he was a king, the master who could do what he liked with his servants. In him the two gunas, tamas and rajas, were predominant, and so his pride, his arrogance had grown beyond all control. He thought that he was a great man and that every other man was inferior to him. He had not benefited by the company of good and God-loving people who could have, if they had been given a chance, instilled in him some wisdom. This foolish king spoke cruel and arrogant words to the Brahmin, who would not hurt anyone or anything, not even a worm crawling on the ground. Bharata looked long and silent at the king. A slight smile was seen at the corner of his mouth. Without raising his voice, without any rancor, he said, "You are angry with me because you think that I am not carrying your palanquin properly. You spoke with sarcasm when you said that I have been carrying the burden too long and that I am tired. Your meaning is that I am not one bit tired by this burden. In a way, your words are true, but your desire to hurt me with your sarcasm is, I am afraid, pointless. It does not hurt me. Shall I tell you why? You are under the impression that this body of mine is real and that the burden it has been carrying all the while is also real. If this is true, then your words should certainly have hurt me. But then, how can you be sure that these two are real? I cannot prove that this body of mine is real, nor can I prove that the burden it has been carrying is also real. Under the circumstances, how can it be possible to hurt a man, a person, or a thing which is non-existent? The real I in me has absolutely no connection with this so-called body of mine, and insults to this body or injustices heaped on this body do not affect me in the least. You said that I have been carrying the burden alone for a long distance and that I am tired. You meant to insult me, I know, but I do not choose to be insulted. The reason is this: if it is true, there is a distance to be covered. If there is a purpose to be achieved by covering that distance, and if these two factors have anything to do with me, then and only then should I be affected by your remarks. But then, I am not sure of the existence of either of these things or my connection with them, and so I am not affected by your words. You said that I am not big but emaciated. The words are meaningless considering that I am formless and the qualification big and small, lean and fat do not apply to it. These words are for describing the body, the home of the Atman and not the Atman. Fatness or leanness, disease of the mind and the body, hunger, thirst, fear, quarrelsome, desire, old age, sleep, lust, avarice, pain, all these affect one who thinks that he has a body and not me who knows the truth about myself. This body is short lived, limited, while I am endless, eternal. You call me a walking corpse, so are you, and so is every man and animal on this earth. O King, the process of birth and death do not confine themselves to me alone. All things which are undergoing change are liable to birth and death. Every moment there is birth and there is death. If by any chance wealth and the owning of wealth are permanent, then this command of yours and this threat of yours that you will punish me will all be plausible. But it is not so. The difference between a king and a servant arises because of the sense of duality, and I cannot find any other reason for it. There is no such thing as a superior person, and there is no one inferior to him. But you do not seem to realize it. Tell me what I should do now. I have realized myself. I do appear to be a stupid man, a deaf man without any feelings, a fool. But really, the things of the world do not affect me, not in the least. How then is your punishment going to affect me, since I know that I am far away from all this? It will be like kneading flour which has already been kneaded. It will have no effect on my behavior. Bharata took the palanquin and tried to place it once again on his shoulders. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Chapter 64 of Shrimadbhagavatam. Bharata teaches Brahma Vidya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Drained of all pride and arrogance by the words of Bharata, King Rahuguna fell at his feet and spoke in a voice choked with tears, born of shame. He said, "My pride has been destroyed by you. Forgive me for my impertinence and please grant me a boon. Please be gracious enough to tell me who you are. I am the ruler of Sindhu and Sauvira, and they call me Rahuguna. I was on my way to the great Kapila to sit at his feet and learn Brahma Vidya from him. But you seem to be Kapila himself, who has come to me on his own accord to save me. To what good actions in my previous Janma do I owe this great good fortune that has befallen me? Please initiate me into the signs of truth." Bharata was filled with pity for this king who seemed to be really eager to learn. He said, "I will try to help you and you will find the path to salvation. Listen to me very carefully while I explain it all to you." Bharata sat on a large slab of rock which was nearby, and the king sat most humbly at the feet of the master. Bharata then began his discourse on Brahma Vidya. He said, "It is the mind of man which causes him either to fall into the morass called samsara or to find freedom from it. It is a mind which should be subdued. When the mind is tainted with the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, its path is set in the world of objects. It will have to keep on performing actions, good or bad, and the cycle of births and deaths will be endless. It will acquire desires, and according to the desires, its progress will be towards the higher or towards the lower, as the case may be. Pleasure and pain will affect the life of a man, and there will be no end to it. So long as the mind is attached to the things of the world, it can never glow on its own accord. Take the example of a little lamp. It has a wick, and the wick is fed by a quantity of ghee. When it burns, the flame will be colored because of the quality of the ghee which is feeding it, and the smoke and light emanating from it will all have the quality of the ghee. If, however, the ghee is all exhausted, the wick will then burn on its own accord with the color and glow which is natural, and it will eventually be converted to nothingness. Even so, the mind, So long as it is fed by the gunas, it will become colored by them and act accordingly. When the gunas leave the mind, it will reach a stage when it will have no existence. Just as the wind pervades the entire space, the Lord pervades the entire universe. When the jiva sheds all attachment, conquers the six enemies, and illuminates itself with the lamp of wisdom, then the jiva will be free. But till then, he will have to go through the pain of being born again and again into this world. The mind should be controlled if the senses and the six arch enemies have to be conquered. The mind, if it is led towards the feet of the Lord's, if it takes refuge there, then there is no fear of its losing itself in the forest called samsara. Once the jiva is set on the path called karma, it is beset with many pitfalls. Birth and death comprise a forest. The jiva gets lost in this forest, deluded in many ways, deluded mostly by Maya. The three gunas make him perform actions which are good, bad, or indifferent, and in proportion to them he acquires a certain amount of punya or papa. The aim of the jiva now becomes the pursuit of happiness, and in this search for happiness it gets lost in the wilderness called samsara. The six senses are well nigh six thieves who steal on you when you are unaware of their approach and rob you of your wisdom. They make you become attached to women, home, child, money, wealth, power, and such like. You get involved in Maya and are helpless in finding your own way out. You are then well established in Grihasthrama, which is indeed a very sad state of affairs. The earth, though it looks as though all the plants have been removed from its surface, is in reality not bare. The seeds which have already been buried in it sprout forth in no time, and this cycle will go on and on until the seeds are burnt away. The Grihasthrama is like a box of camphor. In course of time, the camphor gets sublimated, and it looks as though the box is empty. But the smell, the vasana, is still remaining, and it will cling to the box. So long as the box has an existence, so long as the box has an entity, the vasana will persist, and it will remain part of the box until the box is completely destroyed. Once you get involved in the ashrama by name Grihastha, there is no salvation for you. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Madamat, Matsarya, the senses and the mind, which is the master of the senses, all these will lure you away from the path to salvation. Think of the life on the earth. There is so much pain, loss, happiness, sorrow, love, hatred, fear, delusion, madness, avarice, jealousy, hunger, thirst, pain in the mind and pain in the body. Birth and its arch enemy, death, are all there. Man has no time to think of the Lord, and he never keeps the company of saints who have renounced worldly things. Still, even in spite of all these drawbacks, there is hope for man. If he controls the mind, if he learns the art of pulling the reins of the mind, if he can conquer the six enemies and turn his mind towards the Lord, he can be rid of the cycle of birth and death. This wisdom cannot be obtained by penance, not by performing your religious rites faultlessly, not by feeding 1,000 people, not by charities performed by the Grihasthas, not by chanting the Vedas incessantly, nor by the worship of the gods. Only by falling at the feet of the saints and taking the dust of their feet and surrendering himself to a guru can a man attain salvation. Let a man, then desirous of getting freedom, spend all his time with the bhaktas of the Lord. He will then learn how to break away from the bondage called delusion, Maya. The stories of the Lord and the singing of his praises will guard his spiritual wealth from the thieves who are lodged in his body. The six thieves, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada and Matsarya. Soon, very soon, man will give up his ego and his mind will obey him. The rest is easy. O King, learn to renounce everything. Be compassionate towards all living beings. Sever the bonds of attachment to everything. With a mind pure and free, you will soon reach the other shores of this immense ocean called samsara, and I assure you, you will not come back. Rahugana prostrated before Bharata and said, My Lord, being born as a man is the greatest of blessings granted to the Jiva by the Lord. I am not jealous of the gods at all, since it is not given to everyone, not even the gods, to have the good fortune of coming across great souls like you. I have had that unique privilege. By your company for just a muhurta, all my ignorance has been driven away. I am rid of my pride and ego. You have taught me that there is only one duty for man, and that is to surrender to the Lord. I bow before you again and again. There is no other way in which I can express my gratefulness to you. Bharata blessed him and went his way to wander on the face of the earth as long as the Lord thought it fit to keep his body alive. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.